back to the show. This is The Law Show on CL 650.
And welcome back to The Law Show on CL 650. Joe Murphy is our guest this week on The Law Show. He's a partner at MurphyBattista in downtown Vancouver. We're talking about ICBC, the changes that have happened throughout the decades with the ICBC. It's still a crown corporation, I guess is the best way to describe it.
Yes, it is, like BC Hydro.
And it's changed. Money flows in and out of ICBC, as Joe says, with influence from the government in power at the time. And now we're looking at rate increases. So what has changed, and what should people expect when they get their insurance renewed?
Well, it's been announced, Zach, that the government is going to hold the rate increase on the basic coverage to 4.9%.
But that's way above the rate of inflation. Rate of inflation is around 1.5%.
Yeah, but if ICBC was allowed to set the rate each year based on what its costs, then we might have years. And there was a time where there would be no increase or a 1% increase or 2%. It's the government influence that tends to sort of put a stopper on the rates. And then it's only when the thing is sort of overflowing, you say, well, we have to deal with this. It was like, as you mentioned, there was some years ago, the ICBC said we've got an extra $30 for each of our policyholders.
Yeah, that was in the 90s, because I remember where I was living when I got the check, and it was in an apartment in the 90s.
And it would have been so easy then to just give you credit on your renewal the next year. And instead, they went to the process of mailing everyone $30 again on the eve of an election.
Yes.
And I bet it cost them $30 in handling to send out the $30 checks. I thought that was really a waste. And again, it was a good example of the government ability to influence or interfere with ICBC.
But this 4.9% increase is on the basic rate.
Yes.
And that's your liability insurance. Now, that can't be good news in light, I guess they're holding it back at 4.9% in light of the election coming in the spring for the Liberals.
Well, government or ICBC said we need 15%, and that's not overnight. This hasn't happened overnight. It's happened over time, and again, the government has influenced the ability of ICBC to say we need an increase. So it's been that. The 4.9% is on the basic coverage. Mm-hmm. So with my policy, Zach, I look at it, and the basic coverage is about half my premium. So for me, the 4.9% is half that on the total insurance premium. So it's not a huge amount of money, but the reality is, had the government not drawn the money out of ICBC over the last 4 or 5 years, we wouldn't need that.
Now,
but again, the money's been used in general revenues to do a variety of other things, and I'm not criticizing those other things. I'm just saying that should this have been coming from ICBC?
All right. Now, you mentioned there's the sort of two silos of funds. One is the basic insurance, the liability that everybody has to have, and then you have the additional coverage, theft, fire, all that sort of stuff that we've had for many years. So, can the government say, okay, use some of the profits from that, like as you mentioned before the break, have the dinner service pay for the breakfast service if you're running a restaurant? Have they influenced them in that way?
I always thought that was the ICBC mandate when they were established, to run it at a break-even basis. Mm-hmm. As a crown corporation, and do it with transparency, so you could get the annual statement and see what money came in, about $4 billion a year, and where it got paid out to. And the idea that there's a difference between the basic package and the optional package, I think doesn't make sense, because when I pay a premium, when I go to renew my insurance, they don't ask me for 2 payments. Mm-hmm. They say, here's the price of the coverage you're buying.
But they do break it down on the invoice as basic coverage.
Yes,
they do break it down separately.
Well, I think that's to show people, here's the different costs. And for some people, they say, well, okay, I'm going to change that coverage because I don't want to spend that much.
Right.
It shows them where they might adjust the coverage to change the premium.
So they would say, okay, instead of $5 million of liability, I'll take $1 million. Yep. And it's a little bit less expensive. Yep. Now, one thing I always found interesting, when I moved here in 1991 and came from Ontario, which is very expensive to insure a car, and having owned many cars since then, some of them sort of more expensive import performance cars, expensive sports cars. It's so inexpensive to insure these cars. I had a Porsche that I had, and it cost me $1,600 to insure. Now, I don't want them to listen in Victoria to this show and say, oh, by the way, we should start jacking up the prices. But I couldn't believe how affordable it was to have a premium car insured in British Columbia. Do you think that's going to change?
Well, Zach, the basis of setting the premium for any car should be based upon what they think the realistic cost of insuring that car is. What's the chance that it's going to be in an accident? And if it is, what's that cost of those claims going to be? ICBC historically has always had the lowest exotic car premium rates in Canada. So you say, okay, what is it that the other companies across Canada know that ICBC doesn't about what a reasonable price is? ICBC has announced recently they're going to do away with covering exotic cars. They say that's going to save them $2.3 million a year. ICBC pays out $4 billion a year. So a saving of $2.3 million, I think, is more for a political benefit, the announcement, than it is to try and save money off the $4 billion a year. Why don't you just increase the premiums for the exotic cars so that they cover their actual cost? What's happened in BC recently, though, Zach, and I've lived here since the 60s, is I used to commonly see exotic cars on the street driving around, and now I see even more of them, and the difference now is a lot of the ones I see now have the new driver sticker on it, which I would have never guessed before. Before, if someone went out and bought a Ferrari or Lamborghini, they were a car nut and they were really into cars. Now I see new drivers driving the exotic cars, and I think, boy, is that car safe in their hands?
Yeah.
So is it surprising that the cost of the premiums or the rate of accidents has gone up, given a new driver an exotic high-powered car? I don't think it is. But again, you deal with that by just increasing the rates. You say, okay, we're going to charge 30% more so that $2.3 million loss goes away.
Well, the other part is that I was speaking with somebody who's putting together a conference in Ontario with the body collision industry. So they're having an annual meeting at the end of January that I'm going to be attending. And with all of the new technology that's going into cars, like the sensors, the forward collision warning systems, the bumpers, the cameras, all of this, a fender bender now is not $1,000. It can be $4,000 or $5,000. So it'll be interesting to see if coverage gets changed with that.
Well, Zach, it can be even more than that. If you get an exotic car sideswiped, and some of them have the electronics running through the body, you may be looking at totaling it on a claim that on a normal car might be $5,000 or $6,000 or $8,000. Yeah,
I saw a story about a Tesla, the electric car, that wasn't much of an impact, but it was so expensive to repair it. They just said, well, we'll just write it off.
That's a
$100,000 car.
Yeah.
All right, Joe, your final thoughts on ICBC, where we're heading? What should people be bracing for? More of the same, do you think?
Well, Zach, as I said earlier, I'm a great fan of ICBC. I think they offer a fabulous package of insurance. They deal very well with claims. They deal consistently with claims. They have policies that are fairly fair. I'm a great fan. I think we are far better served in BC by having ICBC than 20 or 30 private companies. I would hope the government would let ICBC do what it was set up to do, which is run the business on a break-even basis in a transparent way. But what's happened over the last 10, 15 years is the government seems to be more and more involved with ICBC, including drawing monies out of ICBC that should be left in there to pay. So if I pay $1 in insurance premiums, it's to insure my car. It's not to provide extra money to the government to pay for the various things that have to be paid out of general revenue. I think from the government's point of view, they thought we can do this and not raise the sales tax. Mm-hmm. And that's far more popular because most people don't even know that we're taking this money out of ICBC. Again, $1 billion since 2012. So ICBC does a great job. The problem's created when people start interfering with how it's operated.
Joe Murphy, it's been great to have you in. Such insight into something you've been so closely associated with for many decades. Joe Murphy from MurphyBattista in downtown Vancouver. That wraps it for this version of The Law Show. I'm Zach Spencer. You're listening to CL 650.